Behold his mighty hand. I couldn't resist that. It felt so good, I'm going to do it again. Behold his mighty hand. Well, it's Saturday morning cartoons, and I am being animated, obviously. Yeah, I'm going to talk about this guy right there today, okay? Ankh-af-na-khonsu. Now, for those of you who are totally unfamiliar with the mythos of the Genesis, if you will, the Genesis, if you will, of Thelema and the Book of the Law and the Aeon of Horus, I'm going to just briefly say this. On early in, I guess it was in March of 2004, Crowley was honeymooning with his new wife, Rose, and he was starting to kind of get her interested in magic, but he wasn't really trying, but it was a part of his life, his old life, that he was beginning to share with her. But anyway, they went to the Bullock Museum, and Rose saw this stele. Okay, it's a simple funeral stele. It was labeled 666, actually, but it was the funeral stele, 26th dynasty, I think. Of this guy right here, okay, this guy right there, Ankh-af-na-khonsu, and he was a priest, and he had painted his own stele on stuccoed wood, and it's his own funeral stele. Okay, now this is more or less a classic, what they would do. There are classic spells, if you will, from the Egyptian Book of the Dead on every well-dressed mummy's stele. And they just sort of plug in their family name, and they sort of plug in their name, and they sort of plug in what their job was. But everything else was a formulaic spell from the Egyptian Book of the Dead. Okay, that was the thing. And very few of them were engraved on the back. But the spell that's on the back of this one is the same spell that is engraved on the foot, like if this was the foot of a very large, like a hand-size scarab, a stone scarab. And that stone scarab was placed in place of the flesh and blood heart in the mummy. So it's like the heart chakra spell of the heart scarab. And it's a giant one. This would be a giant version of that. So it was very unusual. And so that's why the museum, out of millions of other exhibits, had this on display at the Bullock Museum, which is now the Cairo Museum. And the character Ankh-af-na-khonsu was, a notable character that appears in other Egyptian literature of that dynasty. He was sort of maybe like a Henry Kissinger. So he was a notable person. Well, Rose sort of fell into a trance when she saw the stele, and she said, "That is the God that's trying to talk to you." And of course, we've gone over the entire sequence of events after that, but it initiated the change of the old aeon to the change of the new aeon. And Ankh-af-na-khonsu there, Crowley speculated, was the guy whose incarnation and behavior in that incarnation helped facilitate the change from the aeon of Isis to the aeon of Osiris, and which is a similar prophetic job that Crowley would do, moving us from the age of Osiris to the age of Horus. So Ankh-af-na-khonsu is a pretty important character, and Crowley would eventually identify himself as the incarnation of Ankh-af-na-khonsu. Like the guy pops up every few thousand years to help change the aeon. Who knows? Okay, but on a mystical level, and even Crowley will identify it as a mystical level, he's the incarnation of Ankh-af-na-khonsu. Now, what do we know about Ankh-af-na-khonsu in real life? Well, his mummy may very well be in Chicago. Yeah, his stela is still in Cairo, but at least there is a bona fide Ankh-af-na-khonsu mummy at the Cairo, at the Chicago Museum. It's not at the Oriental Institute at the university, but it's at just whatever the municipal, or at least it was advertised as on display a few years ago. Maybe our Chicago friends can chime in with more details on that. But today, I'd like to share with you at least something that an attempt by Crowley to say something about Ankh-af-na-khonsu. Okay, but first, I'm going to read the translations of the hieroglyphs. Okay, there's a number of hieroglyphs, and there's that spell, and that spell is continued over on the back. It just takes a second, but it'll help you, I think, better get an idea of who the characters Crowley is talking about in the Book of the Law, and the verses that he includes from the stele he inserted later at Rose's direction within the text of published Book of the Law books. So I'm going to try to do two things at once here for a second. Let's get it up like this. First of all, let me do this. First of all, this section right here, the topmost section, those things there. It says, Behudet, or Hadit, the great God, Lord of heaven. That's what it says. So that's why we're identifying Hadit as the winged solar glyph part of the stele. Nuit, of course, is this giant blue women's basketball player there. Okay. The middle register, here's the middle register, these vertical lines. The two vertical lines to the left, Ra Ha-Harikiti, that's Ra-Horquit, master of the gods. And then the 5 lines to the right, over here, these, Osiris, the priest of Mantu, it says here, Lord of Thebes, opener of the doors of Nut in Karnak, Ankh-af-na-khonsu, the justified. So all of this probably would have been pretty much a stock stele, and then his personal information they wrote right there. Okay. Then below the altar, okay, I got a stuffed alligator here. I'm going to set this on. Oh, that's apt. Okay, right under the stele, or the altar here where my book is pointing, it says, get back you crocodile. No, it'll say that someplace later though. Okay. There's oxen, geese, wine, and bread. So that's the offerings there on the thing. Now, down below that, on the lowest register, that it simply says, "Saith Osiris, priest of Mentu, lord of Thebes, the opener of the doors of Nut at Karnak," that's his gig, "Ankh-af-na-khonsu, the justified, hail, thou whose praise is high, thou great-willed, O soul, O Ba, very awful, awful, meaning mighty and awful, that give terror in him among the gods, shining in glory upon his great throne, making ways for the Ba, for the soul, for the spirit, yeah, and for the shadow, Kab. I am prepared, I shine forth as one that is prepared. I have made way to the place in which are Ra, Tum, Kefra, and Ahathor, sounding familiar. Osiris, the priest of Mentu, lord of Thebes, Ankh-af-na-khonsu, the justified, son of, and this is the father's name, and the method of spelling in this translation of the hieroglyphs shows that he was a foreigner. And they're all caps here. M-N-B-S-N-M-T. And that is Besnamat. Besnamat. Born of the sistrum bearer of Ammon, that was his mother's gig. She was a priestess that shook the cisterns. The lady, and I'll spell this, A-T-N-E, Tene dash S-H-E-R, Atenasher, Tanik. Son of Besnamat, born of the cistern fairy of Amun, Tanik. Now, hang on. Because I think he says differently otherwise, that Besnamat was the father, that Besnamat was the mother. Well, we'll see in just a minute when I get to my thing. But anyway, they're plucked off the stele. And the 11 lines of writing say, "Saith Osiris, priest of Mentu, lord of Thebes, Ankh-af-na-khonsu, the justified." And this is straight from the Book of the Dead. "My heart from my mother, my heart from my mother, my heart of my existence upon earth, stand not forth against me as a witness. Drive me not back among the sovereign judges, neither incline against me in the presence of the great God." Oh, please, I'm dead now. Please give me a break. Okay. Now that I'm united with earth in the great west and endure no longer upon earth. Excuse me. You can bless me, dear.
I'm getting an onion for breakfast out of the pantry.
We're finding out that Besnamat and Tanik, at least in this, suggests that it's the other way around.
Who knows?
Who knows, indeed.
Somebody does.
But if there's any question, I would trust Constance more. Okay. Then finally, saith Osiris, he who is in Thebes, Ankh-af-na-khonsu, the justified, the only one shining like, or shining in the moon, either way, Osiris, Ankh-af-na-khonsu, has come forth upon high among these thy multitudes, and he has gathered together those that are in the light, the underworld, the duat, and also open to him, also the duat, also open to him. Lo, Osiris, Ankh-af-na-khonsu, cometh forth by day to do all that he wishes upon the earth among the living. Okay. Now, those of you who are familiar with Liber 45 or the Mass of the Phoenix will recognize that last stanza in the final words of the Mass of the Phoenix. I entered in with woe, with mirth I now go forth, and with thanksgiving to do my pleasure upon the earth among the legions of the living. Okay. So, what am I going to read to you that Crowley says about Ankh-af-n-Khonsu? Well, in Equinox number 1, volume 7, is a little essay, a book, if you will. It's called Across the Gulf. Now, many of you probably are familiar with Across the Gulf. It's really weird. And I'm only going to read you chapter 1 this morning. I don't even know if any of you want me to continue on. But chapter 1 deals with Crowley 5 years after the discovery of the stelae. Coming to grips with who he and Ankh-af-na-khonsu are. And he's toying with the idea that he is literally the incarnation of Ankh-af-na-khonsu. So hang on just a second here. I'm gonna do a little adjustment here. You didn't want to actually see that, me struggling like that. I don't need your pity. Okay, Across the Gulf, chapter 1. At last the matter comes back to my mind. It is now 5 years since I discovered my stele at Bulak, but not until I obtained certain initiation in the city of Benares last year did the memory of my life in the 26th dynasty, when I was prince and priest in Thebes, began to return. Even now much is obscure, but I'm commanded to write, so that in writing the full memory may be recovered. For without the perfect knowledge and understanding of that strange life by the Niles, the Nile, I cannot fully know and understand this later life, or to find that tomb which I am appointed to find, and do that therein which must be done. Now, it sort of opens up like a 1933 Boris Karloff. And that's what makes it fun. Therefore, with faith and confidence, do I, who was in a certain mystical sense the priest of the princes Ankh-af-n-Khonsu, child of Tannikh, the Holy and Mighty One, and of Besna-maut, priestess of the Starry One. Set myself to tell myself the strange things that befell me in life. Okay, this written 5 years, I'm digressing. This written 5 years after the reception of the Book of the Law, and that period of time where they were translating the stele and everything else. It seems like in the translation of the stele, it's suggesting that Tannikh was the mother, but here, obviously, he's interpreting it another way. So, the idea that the father's name, Besna-maut, was a foreigner. Bez is an Ethiopian sort of pan god, and he sort of joined up with Maut or Ma'at, the Egyptian vulture god. So, but anyway, I'm pretty set that Besna-maut, the foreigner's name, was indeed the father, and Tannikh, or that Besna-maut. I'm confused here. And if anyone can straighten me out definitively, let me know. But in this case, he is saying Tannikh is the father, and Besna-maut is the priestess. Thus, let's move on. Thus, at my birth, Amphiumis, that must be a Egyptian planet or constellation or something. I'm not sure that it is not Arcturus, the star. In the sign of the lion was ascending, and in it that strange hidden planet that presides over darkness and magic and forbidden love. The sun was united with the planet of Amun, but in the abyss, as showing that my power and glory should be secret, and that Arcturus, I'll spell it for you, and I think it's Arcturus, Aterecinis, the second decadent in the house of Ma'at, so that my passion and pleasure should be likewise unprofane. In the house of travel, in the son of the ram was the moon, my sweet lady, and the wise men interpreted this as a token that I should travel afar, and it might be to the great temple at the source of the mother Nile. It might be foolishness. I've scarce stirred from Thebes or Thebai. I have explored strange countries that they knew not of, and of this also will I tell in due course. Now listen to this description of the moment of his birth, and imagine Egyptian astrologers seeing the different pantheon of Egyptian gods represented by the stars and constellations, and looking at the stars and seeing them as gods, fighting, helping each other, opposing each other. Well, anyway, I digress. I remember, as I never could while I lived in Chemland, or Egypt, all the minute care of my birth. For my mother was the oldest house in Thebes, her blood not only royal, but mixed with the divine. 50 virgins in their silver tissue stood about her, shaking their sistrons, as if the laughter of the gods echoed the cries of the woman. By the bed stood the priest of Horus, with his heavy staff, the phoenix for its head, the prong for its foot. Watchful, he stood lest Sebek should rise from the abyss. On the roof of the palace watched the 3 chief astrologers of Pharaoh with their instruments, and 4 armed men from the corners of the tower announced each god as it rose. So these 3 men ached and sweated at their task, for they had become most anxious. All day my birth had been expected, but as tomb, sunset god, but as tomb drew to his setting, their faces grew paler than the sky. For there was one dread moment in the night which all their art had failed to judge. The gods that watched over it were veiled. But it seemed unlikely that fate would so decide, yet so they feared that they sent down a priest of Thoth, that he must in all costs avoid that threatening moment. Don't let the baby be born at this particular moment, even if the lives of the mother and child should pay for it. And still the watchman cried the hour. Now, now, cried the oldest of the astrologers as the moment grew near. Now! Below, in answer, the priest of Thoth summoned all his skill. When lo, a rumbling of the abyss, the palace reeled and fell. Typhon rose, mighty in destruction, striding across the skies. The world rocked with earthquake. Every star broke from its fastening and trembled. And lo, in the midst, lo, Besnamaut, my mother, and in her arms myself, laughing in the midst of all that ruin. Yet not one living creature took the slightest hurt. But the astrologers rent their robes and beat their faces on the ground, for the dread moment of the unknown terror had gone by, and with it I had come to light. In their terror, indeed, as I learned long after, they sent messengers to the oldest and wisest of the priests, the high priest of Nuit, who lived at the bottom of a very deep well, so that his eyes, even by day, should remain fixed upon the stars. But he answered them that since they had done all they could, and fate had reversed their design, it was evident that the matter was in the hands of fate, and that the less they meddled, the better it would be for them. For he was a brusque old man, and afterwards I met him, and how afterwards I met him shall be written in its place. Later chapter. So then I was to be brought up as befitted one in my station, half prince, half priest, and I was to follow my father, hold his wand and ankh, and assume his throne. And now I begin to recall some details of my preparations for that high and holy task. And that's where I'm going to leave us today. I think I will pick up and finish off our chapter 1 at least, of Across the Gulf. And again, I apologize for the confusing you unnecessarily more than necessary. But when you see the translation of the stele and you see the how we're supposed to treat those two names, I've just decided in my imagination to go for the way he has it outlined here. But Constance has a wonderful thought on the parents of Ankh-af-na-khonsu, just by the verses that we insert into the Book of the Law. By best Namaut, my breast I beat. I'm inspired by my father. Okay, if you look at it that way. By wise Tonique I weave my spell. So the contributions, the emotional contributions, the magical contributions of each father. One, your heartbeat is beating because of them. And then you're magically, mystically, well, we'll have Constance talk about that herself from her own unique, beautiful point of view. Anyway, God, we've gone over. Until tomorrow, continue to be good to yourself, be good to each other. Do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law. Love is the law, love under will.